Resident Evil 7 Biohazard was once the franchise's highest-selling game and was responsible for ushering in a new age for the IP, first released in 2017 for PlayStation 4 and other contemporary platforms of the time. I chose to open this by highlighting the game's financial success because it's kind of a given when you look back at it almost a decade later, but it was a radical new direction for the series and was also a throwback at the same time. So let's talk about it. Resident Evil 6 from 2012 needs no introduction. It's one of the franchise's most infamous titles. I played it all the way through for the first time earlier this year, and I thought that RE6 wasn't some unholy grail of gaming. It wasn't some unfinished disgrace. It was a fully polished action game with a lot of content, and if that's up your alley, you might even enjoy it, as many do. But for me, RE6 was killed by how long it was and how so much of it was endless action movie type set pieces. There were so many of them that the visual spectacle became boring as hell. It was a tough game to finish by the end because of how little desire I had to keep playing it. Capcom had very high expectations for the sales of Resident Evil 6, coming off of how popular RE4 and RE5 were. RE6 was just doubling down on what they thought people liked about those games. But the critical reception of RE6 was lukewarm, hence they lowered their sales targets, and despite the game being an immense success by any normal metric, it still didn't meet the lofty expectations. So Capcom needed to do something to pivot this franchise away from where RE6 went wrong. As the decade passed, slower-paced exploratory action games became more popular, see the likes of The Last of Us from 2013. Horror games were also rising again in the indie and AAA spaces, see the success of the RE1 remake getting re-released in 2015, and then the success of RE0 getting the same treatment. Dare I say, those games became more popular than they were when they were originally released. So the world was ready for a new, scary RE game, which is where Resident Evil 7 comes into the picture. A new game that was designed to go back to the survival horror roots of the RE series, but from a fresh new perspective. First person. You saw this game from the player character's POV. Perfect for the game's virtual reality compatibility. It also made the game a natural fit for live streamers and Let's Players, which is how many horror games get their famous status these days. It even made me interested when it came out. Seeing a lot of buzz about how cool and scary RE7 was made me want to try it, but I never did so back when it came out. I didn't get into the series for a couple of years afterwards, but I've been over that story like a half a dozen times now. I've played RE7 before, but it's been a while, so I was looking forward to getting back into it now that I've played the entire series. Something that no doubt contributed to a lot of people getting into RE7 as their first entry in the series is that the story and premise make it easy to do so. You know, RE6 was this globe-trotting adventure with 7 protagonists, all with their own backstories related to various games in the series and competing motivations. It was a lot. But RE7 stars a brand new character, Ethan Winters. His wife disappeared 3 years ago, and then he gets a mysterious email from her saying that she's at the Baker residence in Dulvey, Louisiana, and Ethan takes off to find her. In the process, he gets captured by the Baker family and needs to fight through each one to escape. That's a premise anybody could grasp in 30 seconds and start playing. The first thing players in 2017 would take note of was how the game looked pretty good. The lighting and shadows looked great in RE7, and they still do. This was the first game Capcom released using the custom-developed RE engine, which stands for Reach for the Moon engine, not Resident Evil. But anyway, in RE7, those elements do still look good, but in many ways the visuals haven't aged the best. Long hair looks really bad in this game, and lower res textures are put in your face a lot, but to the game's credit, it is a full 60 frames per second on PS4, which was pretty rare last generation. Many big games with high production values tended to run at 30 frames per second, so RE7 wins in performance compared to other games at the time, and the RE engine would only continue to improve with each new game that used it. Looking to the gameplay, despite the change in perspective, the controls are pretty easy to get to grips with. You can still use the face buttons to access the inventory, you can still quick turn, aim, fire, and do all that good stuff. Essentially, all the modern RE games from this game onward have the same control scheme whether the game is first person or third person. And the game plays pretty similarly to previous entries, despite the shift in perspective. What is new compared to previous games is Ethan's defense. By pressing L1, Ethan will raise his arms, and if you time it right, you won't take damage from enemy attacks. Clearly, Ethan was getting dodge and parry training from Leon Kennedy off-screen, because he's a remarkably sturdy guy. Honestly, the most unintentionally funny part about RE7 and RE8 for me is Ethan's durability and never-ending will to live. Like, right at the start of RE7, Ethan's a totally normal dude taking falls like nothing, and then he gets his hand stabbed by a screwdriver and a knife, all from his wife who got possessed and tried to kill him like multiple times. By the time she grabs the chainsaw, I'd just be like, fuck it, dude, let fate take me. I'm just saying, Ethan has spirit. But then he gets his hand cut off, and he just picks it up, adds it to the inventory, and then it gets stapled back on, fully functional, by Zoe, Jack Baker's daughter, who has yet to succumb to whatever has taken over the Baker family, as she and Ethan work together on a way out and a cure for Zoe and Mia. RE7 goes back to the classic RE formula in the purest sense because once Ethan gets captured by Jack Baker, you have to escape the main house, and then explore the side house, and then return to the main house before the final areas. The structure is very similar to Resident Evil 1 and the classic games that followed its mold. In order to escape, you need to explore the house and find keys to open locked doors that contain key items that will further allow you to explore the house and let you escape, which is exactly like RE1. Even calling back to some classic puzzles. This was one of the first RE games I played, so I got to the part where you needed to replace a real shotgun with a broken one to escape a room and thought nothing of it, but when I played RE1 for the first time, I realized that this was a callback to that puzzle from the first game. But then RE7 introduces new puzzles into the mix, like these perspective-based painting puzzles. You twist a statue around and make it look like whatever is in the painting. That's new for the series and feels in place for a first-person adventure game. RE7 succeeds in taking what was fantastic game design in 1996 and adapting it into a new setting while maintaining the same appeal. Even though it's entirely different gameplay from RE1, you still feel the same satisfaction from seeing a locked door with a scorpion icon, finding the scorpion key, and realizing you can finally open that door. It's basic, but it's timeless regardless of what gameplay is attached to it. RE7 also succeeded at the majority of the core pillars of the franchise that I laid out in my RE5 video, where I said that, to me, the core pillars of the series are resource management, tension, exploration, and replayability. Exploration is a given, I was just talking about that. The game uses the same structure of puzzles and unlocks as any of the classic RE games, so you'll more than get your fair share of exploration in this game. Whether that's puzzles, progression items, or little things to find like hidden upgrades, such as the steroids that boost your maximum health, or the antique coins that you use to unlock more steroids or a better handgun. You'll get to look around the Baker residence in full and are rewarded for your curiosity. Resource management is also a well-done part of RE7 because like the first couple Resi games, you won't have much ammo and the magazine capacity is not that high. Ethan only gets a couple of basic weapons in this, like a handgun, a shotgun, a makeshift flamethrower, and a grenade launcher, but not much else in a normal playthrough. Ammo is not in great supply, and so every shot counts as you face bugs and mold monsters. Tension naturally rises from that limited ammo pool, but RE7 also made being scary a part of its design. While exploring the Baker house, Jack will frequently terrorize you, and when I first played this game, I was scared shitless of him. Like, having this super strong farmer type dude walking around the house talking about how he's gonna fuck you up was absolutely terrifying. And avoiding his line of sight always felt like the most tense shit I'd ever played up to that point. This game made the stalker enemy a recurring part of the RE series. It had been done before, but following this game, almost every single one had an equivalent, since on the first playthrough it can really get to you. Getting caught by him was scary, and so were the bonkers scripted sequences and boss fights. The first boss with Jack was in the garage, and it was nuts. It's the one where he kills a cop, and you learn that Jack is seemingly invincible and immortal. But along the way, you grab the keys to this car and try to run him over, but you gotta do it fast, or else he's gonna grab the keys and try to run you over. He's an entertaining enemy to have in the game, and that fact holds up to scrutiny on my second playthrough. The game puts scares in your face like no other RE game, and I think part of why they did that, beyond the rise of streamer culture, was the game's usage of the PlayStation VR headset. But RE7 is perfectly normal to play without VR, so don't worry if you don't have it though, because honestly, I don't think you're missing much. I happen to own a used PSVR headset from the Batman Arkham spin-off video I made last summer, so I figured I'd whip out the headset and try RE7. Which first reminded me of just how many cords there are for this thing, and how many things needed to be plugged in at once. It's a very cumbersome setup. But I honestly had more fun with this game and got more tension out of playing it without VR. Unlike, say, Resident Evil 4 Oculus, which I played, this wasn't really that immersive. You put the headset on, but you still play the game with the controller, so you're looking around as Ethan with the headset, but it doesn't really feel that different from using a regular screen and an analog stick to control the camera. Unlike RE4 VR, where you run around the game world and reload your weapons like you're actually in the game. It's neat to use the headset and hear the audio through the headphones, but the experience isn't that different whether you use one or not. And I imagine most people who played didn't use VR, so it's a good thing the game design still works whether you use it or not. But yeah, I was talking about the core pillars of RE, and unfortunately, RE7 stumbles at the final one, and it's a pretty big one: replay value. Now, RE7 has much of the same appeal in replaying it as other games in this series. You know, you see your stats at the end of the game, such as how many times you died and how long it took you to beat the game. Going back through it a second time, you can be better at the game and get through it faster knowing puzzle solutions and such. Just the same as any other RE game. On your first playthrough, you'll need to watch this scary videotape of a ghost hunting show looking through the house to find out there's a switch to a secret passage in the fireplace. The tape ends with them dying, of course. But if you already know that, you can just pull the switch without watching the tape. So I'm saying RE7 has qualities that make it a replayable game, especially once you unlock Madhouse mode. This sets the enemy AI to as hard as possible and you can't regain health automatically, you can only use healing items. It also only allows you to save if you have a cassette tape in your inventory. Item locations are remixed to be more complex, there are more upgrades but they're harder to find, all stuff that makes the game more challenging to beat. Though I didn't get very far in this because I got killed by Mia in the opening section twice and decided to cease playing. And the reason for that is because of the biggest reason why I wouldn't rush into replaying RE7 in general. This game has unskippable cutscenes, one of the cardinal sins of game design, especially in a game geared towards replayability. You know, RE1 and 2 had unskippable cutscenes, but I feel more forgiving of that because they're way older games, and because the scenes weren't that long or that numerous. In RE7, a boss fight will begin with a cutscene, and if you die, you have to just keep watching it repeatedly before you get to do it again. Before fighting Mia, you've got to walk down the stairs and get through a whole scene of her launching you into the wall and all that. I died during the first Jack Baker fight and had to watch him kill the cop in the garage like 3 times, and died during the Marguerite Baker fight and had to see her crash through the window a couple of times too. I replay games trying to get through them quickly and efficiently, and watching the same cutscenes again just tends to get in the way of that. I think RE7, for me, is a better experience when it's fresh. Like I said, I haven't played this in like 4 years, so while I remembered much of it, it still felt new and tense in terms of horror. This is how I think the game is best enjoyed, since the story will feel new enough to where I wasn't bothered by watching the cutscenes, but I would be if I was trying to become a really good RE7 player. And there are other reasons I don't think this is the most replayable game in the series beyond the cutscenes, like how the intro is long. Before you get to explore the Baker house, you've got to do the whole Finding Mia sequence, which takes about 20 minutes if you know what you're doing, but is pretty one-note and scripted. And then when it comes to the rest of the game past the Baker house, it put in perspective how I think RE7 peaks pretty early. I've said this in many Resi videos, but most classic-styled RE games are the best at the beginning. The opening levels are usually better than the others. Think of how the Spencer Mansion or the RPD were the most layered and complex areas in RE1 and 2 compared to their far less detailed later levels. RE3 managed to avoid that by coming up with several smaller levels you play throughout the game. Even in the games with better opening levels than later ones, it wasn't to say that the later ones weren't good, just that the first one was the best. In RE7, the Baker residence is the best level, but it's also not really gonna light the world on fire, you know? It's a good Resident Evil level, but the puzzles and solutions aren't particularly mind-blowing if you've played the previous games, so I don't think this level is great enough to where it makes up for how the side house, the second area with Marguerite Baker, is short and straightforward compared to the opening. It doesn't have that many rooms and is pretty linear for most of it. Then, the trip back to the house is far shorter than the revisit to the Spencer Mansion in RE1. You do it to find the keys needed to get into Lucas Baker's party, where he's holding Zoe and Mia hostage. Most of this section is pretty scripted and linear too, but the puzzle at the end really stands out and shows why this game is best played relatively blind. Lucas is a twisted fuck, so you have to solve this crazy puzzle where you need to put a lit candle on a birthday cake. But the doorway of the room the cake is in has a pipe above it that will automatically drop water if you go through it, putting the flame out. It took me a few minutes to solve this. It works by taking both the candle and removing the winding key from this barrel that then drops a bunch of oil on the floor. The valve to stop the water is behind a word passcode lock. Getting to it requires putting the winding key inside this clown doll that will write the word loser into Ethan's arm, which is the passcode to the door. Once you stop the water, you can put the lit candle on the cake, but that triggers an explosion that lights the oil on fire and you burn to death. Although that's only half the puzzle. There's a lot more to it than that because it took me like 14 minutes to solve this whole thing because of how many moving pieces and steps were involved. But after dying, I realized one of the main tricks. By dying, the player retains the knowledge that loser is the passcode, so you don't need the winding key to get the doll to write it on your arm. You can skip to the valve immediately, shut off the water, and then detonate the explosive without the oil on the floor because you didn't remove the winding key from the barrel. That was pretty meta for a video game puzzle, that doing the full thing was only going to lead to your death, which is what Lucas wanted. Dying and going back to the checkpoint gives the player knowledge that Ethan shouldn't have, which lets you win to the anger of Lucas. I'm not sure if dying is the only way to solve this puzzle without looking it up on the internet, but I think it's a cool puzzle if that is the only normal way to solve it. But again, my point here is that RE7 has a lot of cool and memorable moments that I felt were only special the first time, and in this case, my first time playing the game in almost half a decade. After that Lucas section, you need to fight Jack Baker in an evolved form, shooting his various eyes from above and below him. I died to this once, but it's a manageable fight, especially if you were reserved with ammo up to this point. Ethan had given Zoe the materials to create a serum to save both her and Mia from the mold brain virus that infected the rest of the family, but in the fight, Ethan used one of them on Jack, so you have to choose either Mia or Zoe. I just went with Mia in both of my playthroughs because this just seemed like what Ethan would do, but that's also the canon ending, so there's that too. To be honest, when I first played this, I thought it was about to end and that Jack was the final boss, but when you make this choice and escape with Mia, RE7 becomes an almost completely different game. Mia and Ethan get attacked on the boat ride out and find themselves at a shipwreck. You're playing as Mia now, and this is when the player learns the truth. At the Baker house, you'd occasionally run into an old woman who you assumed was the grandma or something, but a little girl also showed up at the side house. Her name was Evelyn, and they're the same person. Mia was actually a researcher for some shady project on a tanker in the ocean. She was lying to Ethan about her job, but a flashback shows what happened the day of the shipwreck, which caused Mia's disappearance from Ethan's life. Evelyn is this little girl with accelerated aging that they kept experimenting on, as she has this psychic power and projects things into people's minds. For reasons that keep eluding the researchers, what she keeps projecting into people is that they are her parents, because all she wants is a family. But she's also unstable because she throws up this substance that creates the mold monsters that Ethan fought at the Baker house. So you take control of Mia trying to find Evelyn. It was funny when I started this section because Mia just was carrying a gun. It was a complete left turn that I never saw coming. Mia and her research partner can't control Evelyn as she causes a shipwreck that kills most of the people on board. Jack Baker found the wrecked tanker alongside Evelyn and Mia, and he took them in thinking nothing was wrong with them. But Evelyn proceeded to corrupt the entire Baker family, as confirmed in a vision Ethan gets from Jack saying they aren't killers or bad people, they just weren't in control of their actions. Evelyn was in their minds, making them into something else. While at the Baker house for 3 years, Mia was going in and out of being under Evelyn's control, which was bad for her because she wanted Mia to be her mom more than anyone else. So Evelyn was the one who got Mia to email Ethan her location, thinking that if she got Ethan under her control, they could be her parents. This backfired because neither Ethan nor Mia gave in to her effect. Learning what was going on in RE7 at the end was interesting. Like I said, I didn't see the part where you play a flashback as Mia with a gun coming. You learn other facts like how Lucas Baker was actually not under Evelyn's control, he's just a fucked up freak, and this gave him the perfect cover. He exchanged secrets about Evelyn's power with some outside group. The fact that he was always this way was kind of foreshadowed when you get into his childhood bedroom and read a letter about how he killed a kid who made fun of him by locking him in the attic. So story-wise, this final chapter illuminated many things. But on the game design side of things, the endgame of RE7 slows the pace down to an absolute crawl. The Mia flashback portion was long, and then the portion in the present was a bit difficult to get through since enemies are in abundance and you don't have that many supplies to deal with them. The whole boat sequence was just overlong, and I didn't have a lot of fun with it. I must remind, final levels in RE are usually never that spectacular, but this one especially was kinda eh. When you retake control of Ethan, I was ready for the game to end, so I was running past most enemies, and then the final encounter with Evelyn isn't much to write home about either. You counter some mind waves, hit her with the serum, and then she turns into a monster and that gets defeated pretty easily, and thus, the game is over. It had no connection to the larger series until the very end when Chris Redfield and his crew arrived to clean up the mess. Only, Chris has a totally different voice and face than when players last saw him, but that's to be expected of the RE series now.
I'm Redfield. I'm glad we found you.
The story continues in the DLC. You play as Chris chasing and killing Lucas in the Not a Hero DLC. Chris plays similarly to Ethan, only he's got more equipment and can punch through enemies in a highly satisfying fashion. There were moments here where I died doing stupid stuff, like when I walked into a dark room with no night vision goggles, and of course I got blown up. But overall, I'd say it was a good DLC. I guess I just liked playing as Chris again, and it has many tense moments like when you're trapped in a soon-to-be exploding tube. I enjoyed this one. The story then concludes in the End of Zoe DLC, where you play as Jack Baker's brother Joe trying to save Zoe before she becomes corrupted and dies. This part was fun because he doesn't even have any weapons, you just barehand everything and it was pretty cool. The main antagonist is Jack's final form that Joe puts out of its misery. The ending sees Chris help Zoe because Ethan asked him to do so, which ties up all the loose ends of the story. The regular ending is just Ethan and Mia escaping with Chris and crew and getting to start over, which is a fittingly low-key ending for a low-key adventure.
Mia and I weren't the only victims here. So were the Bakers. It was that thing, Evelyn, who made them that way. But now Evelyn's dead. And these guys are here to clean up the mess. I had just come to terms with losing Mia. But now she's back and wants to start over. Put all this behind us. Maybe this is where the next door opens.
But at the end of the day, I feel as though this script makes it seem like I don't like RE7, or at least don't think it's that great, which is not the case. Resident Evil 7 is a good game. I think it's scary, it's atmospheric, it's tense, and most importantly, it was fresh. If you play through the Resident Evil series, it's a much-needed shock to the system. RE became one of those long-running franchises that kept piling on more story and lore and superpowers and stuff that it reached a boiling point with Resident Evil 6. A game like 7 was exactly what the series needed. It goes back to the series' roots of exploring an evil residence like the first game. It cleverly brings back timeless game design with the structure and puzzles and such, and adapts it in a whole new way that was never before seen in the Resident Evil series and produced a really memorable experience. RE7 got the reception and sales it deserved. I think it's a game well worth playing and experiencing. Jack Baker has well-deserved status as an iconic gaming villain because getting chased by him on your first playthrough is an experience you won't soon forget. I think RE7 is great in many ways. The reason the video got kind of critical about it was because of how, on the replay, I don't think it's the best the series had ever done. RE7 pretty much got everything right. I just think that games like RE1 and 2 and 3 and Remake have superior level design and pacing, and then games like RE4 are just more fun than RE7. And then I think later games like the RE2 and 4 remakes are more polished and enjoyable than what RE7 had to offer. I think it's a strong game, well worth playing. But when analyzing it and comparing it to other RE games, it doesn't execute the ideas as well as some of the others that came before or after. However, it was a well-needed game that kicked off the modern era of RE. Balancing ideas both old and new and doing it with this level of success is very commendable. They really pulled off something seemingly impossible in terms of pleasing old fans and bringing in new ones. So I really respect RE7 and think it's a good game. I don't plan on replaying it much because of how it peaks early and has a slow endgame and doesn't let you skip cutscenes. But hey, with that said, the designers had the ability to improve upon RE7 with RE8, or Resident Evil Village, which came out 4 years later. I played this game right as it came out and never again, so I'm also curious to replay it and tell everyone how I felt about it, which will be the next video. And that's a natural spot to close today's episode on, I'd say. So I'll wrap this up by saying, as always, if you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.